Serene greetings to you. My name is Timothy, and I am here to share a moment of restful slumber with you. This is the time for letting go of your waking thoughts, a time to slip into the arms of Morpheus and surrender to deep, tranquil sleep. Tonight, we'll continue our readings from Birds Every Child Should Know. The Catbird. Slim, lithe, elegant, dainty, the catbird, as he runs lightly over the lawn or hunts among the shrubbery, appears to be a fine gentleman among his kind, a sort of Beau Brummel in smooth grey feathers, who has preened and prinked until his toilet is quite faultless. You would not be surprised to hear that he slept on rose petals and manicured his claws. He is among the first to discover the bathing dish or drinking pan that you have set up in your garden, for he is not too squeamish, in spite of his fine appearance, to drink from his bath. With well-poised, black-capped head erect, and tail up too, wren fashion, he stands at attention on the rim of the dish, alert, listening, tense, the neatest, trimmest figure in birddom. After he has flown off to the nearest thicket, what a change suddenly comes over him. Can it be the same bird? With puffed out, ruffled feathers, hanging his head and drooping tail, he now suggests a fat, tousled schoolboy just tumbled out of bed. Was ever a bird more contradictory? One minute, from the depths of the bushy undergrowth where he loves to hide, he delights you with the sweetest of songs. Not loud like the brown thrashers, but similar, only it is more exquisitely finished and rippling. Prut, prut, coquillicot, he begins. Really, really, coquillicot. Hey, coquillicot. Hey, victory. His inimitable song goes on, like a rollicking recitative. The next minute, you would gladly stop your ears when he utters the disagreeable catcall that has given him his name. Zee, zee, whines the petulant cry. Now you see him on the ground, calmly looking for grasshoppers, or daintily helping himself to a morsel from the dog's plate at the kitchen door. Suddenly, with a jerk and a jump, he has sprung into the air to seize a passing moth. There is always the pleasure of variety and the unexpected about the catbird. He is very intelligent and friendly, like his cousin the mockingbird. One catbird that comes to visit me at least 10 times every day can scarcely wait for the milk to be poured onto the dog's bowl before he has flown to the brim for the first drink. Once, in his eagerness, he alighted on the pitcher in my hand. He has a pretty trick of flying to the sundial, as if he wished to learn the time of day. From his point of vantage, he will sail off suddenly, like a flycatcher, to seize an insect on the wing. He has a keen appetite for so many pests of the garden and orchard, moths, grasshoppers, beetles, caterpillars, spiders, flies, and other insects, that his friendship, you see, is well worth cultivating. 5 catbirds whose diet was carefully watched by scientific men in Washington ate 30 grasshoppers each for one meal. Yet how many people ignorantly abuse the catbird? Because he likes strawberries and cherries as well as we do, is he to be condemned on that account? If he kills insects for us every waking hour from April to October, don't you think he is entitled to a little fruit in June? The ox that treadeth out the corn is not to be muzzled, so that he cannot have a taste of it, you remember. A good way to protect our strawberry patches and cherry trees from catbirds, mockingbirds, and robins is to provide fruit that they like much better. The red mulberry. Nothing attracts so many birds to a place. A mulberry tree in the chicken yard provides a very popular restaurant, not only for the songbirds among the branches, but for the scratchers on the ground floor. Like the yellow-breasted chat, the catbird likes to hide its nest in a tangle of cat briar along the roadside undergrowth and in bushy woodland thickets. Last winter, when that vicious vine had lost every leaf, I counted in it 18 catbird nests within a quarter of a mile along a country lane. Long before the first snowstorm, the inmates of those nests were enjoying summer weather again, from the Gulf states to Panama. If one nest should be disturbed in May or June, when the birds are raising their families, all the catbird neighbors join in the outcry of mews and catcalls. Should a disaster happen to the parents, the orphans will receive food and care from some devoted foster mother until they are able to fly. You see, catbirds are something far better than intelligent musical dandies. The Mockingbird. What child is there who does not know the mockingbird, caged or free? In the North, you very rarely see one nowadays behind prison bars, for, happily, several enlightened states have made laws to punish people who keep our wild birds in cages or offer them for sale, dead or alive. When all the states make and enforce similar laws, there will be an end to the barbaric slaughter of many birds for no more worthy end than the trimming of hats for thoughtless girls and women. Birds of bright plumage have suffered most, of course, but the mockingbird's nests have been robbed for so many generations to furnish caged fledglings for both American and European bird dealers that shotguns could have done no work more deadly. Where the people are too ignorant to understand what mockingbirds are doing for them every day in the year by eating insects in their gardens, fields, parks, and public squares, they are shot in great numbers for the sole offense of helping themselves to a small fraction of the very fruit they have helped to preserve. Even the birds ought to have a square deal in free America. Don't you think so? Although not afflicted with the fatal gift of beauty, at least not the gaudy kind, like the cardinals and scarlet tanagers, the mockingbird's wonderful voice has brought upon him an equal quantity of troubles. Keenly intelligent though he is, he does not know enough to mope and refuse to sing in a cage, but whiles away the tedious hours of his captivity by all manner of amusing and delightful sounds. Indeed, it has been found that the household pet is apt to be a better mocker than the wild bird. A most unfortunate discovery. Not only does he imitate the notes of the birds about him, but he invents all manner of quips and vocal jugglery. His love song is entrancing. Oft in the stilly night, when the moonlight sheds a silvery radiance about every sleeping creature, the mockingbird sings to his mate such delicious music as only the European nightingale can rival. Perhaps the stillness of the hour, the beauty and fragrance of the place where the singer is hidden among the orange blossoms or magnolia, increase the magic of his almost pathetically sweet voice. But surely there is no lovelier sound in nature on this side of the sea. Our poet Lanier declared that this heavenly bird will be hailed as brother by Beethoven and Keats when he enters the choir invisible in the spirit world. Ever alert on the qui-vive, the mockingbird can no more suppress the music within him, night or day, than he can keep his nervous, high-strung body at rest. From his restlessness alone, you might know he is the cousin of the catbird and brown thrasher, and is closely related to the wrens. Flitting from perch to perch, fluttering is one of his chief amusements even in a cage. taking short flights from tree to tree, and so displaying the white signals on his wings and tail, hopping lightly, swiftly, gracefully over the ground, bounding into the air, or the next minute shooting his ashy gray body far across the garden and leaving a wake of music behind as he flies. He seems to be perpetually in motion. If you live in the South, you can encourage no more delightful neighbor than this star performer in the group of lively singers. The warblers. Yellow warbler, called also summer yellowbird, wild canary. Rather than live where the skies are gray and the air is cold, this adventurous little warbler will travel 2,000 miles or more to follow the sun. A trip from Panama to Canada and back again within 5 months does not appall him. By living in perpetual sunshine, his feathers seemed to have absorbed some of it, so that he looks like a stray sunbeam, playing among the shrubbery on the lawn, the trees in the orchard, the bushes in the roadside thicket, the willows and alders beside the stream. He is shorter than the English sparrow by an inch, although you may not get close enough to see that his yellow breast is finely streaked with reddish brown. You may know by these marks that he is not what you had at first suspected he was. Somebody's pet canary escaped from a cage. It is not he, but the goldfinch, the yellow bird with the black wings, who sings like a canary. Happily, he is so neighborly that every child may easily become acquainted with this most common member of the large warbler family. I don't believe there is anybody living who could name at sight every one of the 70 warblers that visit the United States. Some are very gaily colored and exquisitely marked, as birds coming to us from the tropics have a right to be. Some are quietly clad. Some, like the redstart, are dressed quite differently from their mates and young. Others, like the yellow warbler, are so nearly alike that you could see no difference between the male and female from the distance of a few feet. Some live in the tops of evergreens and other tall trees. Others, like the Maryland yellowthroat, which seems to prefer low trees and shrubbery, are rarely seen over 12 feet from the ground. A few, like the ovenbird, haunt the undergrowth in the woods, or live most of the time on the earth. With 3 or 4 exceptions, all the warblers dwell in woodlands, and it is only during the spring and autumn migrations that we have an opportunity to become acquainted with them when they come about the orchard and shrubbery for a few days' rest and refreshment during their travels. Fortunately, the cheerful little yellow warbler stays around our homes all summer long. Did you ever know a family so puzzling and contradictory as the warblers? The great majority of these fascinating and exasperating relatives are nervous, restless little sprites, constantly flitting from branch to branch and from twig to twig in a never-ending search for small insects. As well try to catch a weasel asleep as a warbler at rest. People who live in the tropics, even for a little while, soon become lazy. Not so the warblers, whose energy, like a steam engine's, seems to be increased by heat. Of course, they do not undertake long journeys merely for pleasure, as wealthy human tourists do. They must migrate to find food, and as insects are most plentiful in warm weather, you see why these atoms of animation keep in perpetual motion. They are among the last migrants to come north in the spring, and among the first to leave in the autumn, because insects don't hatch out in cool weather, and the birds must always be sure of plenty to eat. Traveling as they do, chiefly by night, they are killed in numbers against the lighthouses and electric light towers, which especially fascinate these poor little victims. Who first misled us by calling these birds warblers? The truth is, there is not one really fine singer like a thrush in the whole family. The yellow-breasted chat has remarkable vocal ability, but he is not a real musician like the mockingbird, who also likes to have fun with his voice. The warblers, as a rule, have weak, squeaky, or wiry songs, and lisping seep call notes, neither of which ought to be called a warble. The yellow warbler sings as acceptably as most of his kin. 7 times he rapidly repeats, sweet, 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 sweeter, sweeter, to his sweetheart. But this happy little lovemaker's incessant song is apt to become almost tiresome to everybody except his mate. What a clever little creature she is. More than any other bird, she suffers from the persecutions of that dusky rascal, the cowbird. In May, with much help from her mate, she builds an exquisite little cradle of silvery plant fiber, usually shreds of milkweed stalk, grass, leaves, and caterpillar's silk, neatly lined with hair, feathers, and the downy felt of fern fronds. The cradle is sometimes placed in the crotch of an elder bush, sometimes in a willow tree, preferably near water where insects are abundant, but often in a terminal branch of some orchard tree. Scarcely is it finished before the skulking cowbird watches her chance to lay an egg in that she may not be bothered with the care of her own baby. She knows that the yellow warbler is a gentle, amiable, devoted mother who will probably work herself to death if necessary, rather than let the baby cowbird starve. But she sometimes makes a great mistake in her individual. Not all yellow warblers will permit the outrage. They prefer to weave a new bottom to their nest over the cowbird's egg, although they may seal up their own speckled treasures with it. Suppose the wicked cowbird comes back and lays still another egg in the two-storied nest. What then? The little Spartan yellowbird has been known to weave still another layer of covering rather than hatch out an unwelcome, greedy interloper to crowd and starve her own precious babies. 2 and even 3-storied nests are to be found by bright-eyed boys and girls. Black and white creeping warbler. You may possibly mistake this little warbler for a downy woodpecker when you first see him creeping rapidly over the bark of trees, or hanging from the underside of the branches. But when he flits restlessly from twig to twig and from tree to tree, without taking time to examine spots thoroughly, especially when he calls a few thin, wiry notes, Z, 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 you may know he is no woodpecker, but a warbler. Woodpeckers have thick, set, high-shouldered bodies, which they flatten against the tree trunks. The males wear red in their caps, and all have larger, stouter bills than the warblers. Moreover, no woodpecker is so small as this streaked and speckled little creature, who is usually too intent on feeding to utter a single Z. You could not possibly confuse him with the diligent, placid brown creeper, or with the slate-blue nuthatch, which also creeps along the branches on the under or upper side. Some children I know call this black and white warbler the little zebra bird. Would that all warblers were so easily identified. Ovenbird, called also the teacher, golden-crowned thrush, the accentor. Teacher, 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 resounds a penetrating, accented voice from the woods. Who calls? Not an impatient scholar, as you might suppose, but a shy little thrush-like warbler who has no use whatever for any human being, especially at the nesting season in May and June, when he calls most loudly and frequently. Beginning quite softly, he gradually increases the intensity of each pair of notes in a crescendo that seems to come from a point much nearer than it really does. Once heard, it is never forgotten, and you can always be sure of naming at least one bird by his voice alone. However, his really exquisite love song, a clear, ringing, vivacious melody, uttered while the singer is fluttering, hovering high among the treetops, is rarely heard, or if heard, is not recognized as the teacher's aerial serenade. He is a warbler, let it be recorded, who really can sing, and beautifully, however rarely. Why is he called the ovenbird? A little girl I know was offered $5 by her father if she could find the bird's nest in the high, dry woods near her home. Teacher was the commonest sound that came from them. It rang in her ears all day, so of course she thought it would be too easy to earn the money. Every afternoon when school was out, she tramped through the woods hour after hour, poking about among the dead leaves, the snapping twigs, the velvety moss, the fallen logs, the young spring growth of the little plants and creepers, always keeping her eyes on the ground where she knew the nest would be found. Day after day, she continued the search. Every time she saw a little hump of dead leaves or twigs and grasses, her heart bounded with hope. But on closer examination, she found no nest at all. Finally, one day, when she was becoming discouraged, she spied in the path a little brownish olive bird, about the size of an Old English sparrow, but with a speckled, thrush-like breast and a dull orange V-shaped patch, bordered by black lines on top of his head. He was walking about on the ground, nodding his head as if marking time, not hopping sparrow fashion, and he took very dainty, pretty steps that suggested a French dancing master. Occasionally, he would scratch the path for insects like a tiny chicken. Although she had never seen the teacher and had expected that the loud voice came from a much larger bird, she felt sure that this must be he. So she sat down on a log and watched and waited. Presently, she saw him tug at a fine black hair-like root that lay across the path, and snapping it off, quickly fly away. Away! Oh, where did he go with it? She ran stumbling after him through the undergrowth to a little clearing, There, another bird, just like him, whom she instantly guessed was his mate, flew straight toward her, dropped to the ground, ran about distractedly, dragging one wing as if it were broken, and uttering sharp, piteous notes of alarm. The little girl didn't like to distress the birds, of course, but how could she resist the temptation to find their nest? So on she tramped, around and around, in an ever-widening circle. The excited birds still hovering near and sharply scolding her. You may be sure she was quite as excited as they. At last, a little dome-shaped mound of grasses, half hidden among the dry brown oak leaves and wild geranium, gladdened her eyes. Running around to the opposite side, she knelt down on the grass, peeped under the arched roof, and into the nest, which was shaped like an old-fashioned Dutch oven. Was ever a sight so welcome? She almost screamed with joy. Through the opening on one side, that was about 3 inches high, she could see the lining of fine black rootless, just like the one she had watched the bird snap off and carry away. Then she flew home as if she too had wings, and calling breathlessly, "Oh, Father, Father, I've found it," burst into the house. A week before even one white speckled egg had been laid in the ovenbird's nest, there was a golden half-eagle in a happy little girl's palm. A fortnight later, a man with a camera took a picture of the patient mother bird, whose pretty striped head you see peeping out from under the dome. Maryland yellowthroat, called also black-masked ground warbler. This gay little warbler looks as if he were dressed for a masquerade ball, with a gray-edged black mask over his face, and the sides of his throat a brownish-green coat and a bright yellow vest. He is smaller than a sparrow. How sharply the inquisitive fellow peers at you through his mask whenever you pass the damp thicket bordering the marshy land where he likes best to live. And how quickly he hops from twig to twig and flies from one clump of bushes to another clump in restless warbler fashion as he leads you a dance in pursuit. Not for a second does he stop watching you. If you come too close, a sharp pit-pit or chock is snapped out by the excited bird, whose familiar, oft-repeated, sprightly waltzing triplet has been too freely translated, he thinks, into "follow me, follow me, follow me." Pursuit is the last thing he really desires, and of course he issues no such invitation. What he actually says almost always sounds to me like witchy tea, witchy tea, witchy tea. You will surely hear him if you listen in his marshy retreats. He sings almost all summer, except when nesting. He comes into the garden, picks minute insects out of the blossoming shrubbery, hops about on the ground, visits the raspberry tangle, and hides among the bushes along the roadside. Only the yellow warbler of all his numerous tribe is disposed to be more neighborly. In spite of his local name, he is to be found in winter from Georgia to Labrador and Manitoba, westward to the plains. You see, he is something of a traveler. The little bird who bewitches him, and to whom he sings the witch's song, wears no black mask, so it is not easy to name her if her mate is not about. Her plumage is duller than his, and the sides of her plump little body, which are yellowish brown, shade into grayish white underneath. Sometimes you may catch her carrying weeds, strips of bark, broad grasses, tendrils, reeds, and leaves for the outside of her deep cradle, and finer grasses for its lining, to a spot on the ground where plants and low bushes help conceal it. She does not build so beautiful a nest as the yellow warbler, but like her, she too, poor thing, sometimes suffers from the sneaking visits of the cowbird. Unhappily, she is not so clever as her cousin, for she meekly consents to hatch out the cowbird's eggs and let the big, greedy interloper crowd and worry and starve her own brood. Why does the cowardly cowbird always choose a victim smaller than herself?